the increasing tendency of the British state to celebrate every festival equally, from Diwali to Eid to Christmas. It may seem noble and good on the surface, but it's not necessarily a good idea. And the reason I've been thinking about this is because earlier on this month, the Indian festival of Diwali it drew a lot of attention, and in some circles, a lot of backlash. Not just here, but also in the US. I saw some posts and reactions from Australia. It's not really against the festival itself, but against the way it was perhaps maybe promoted and almost endorsed by the state. Across social media, many people questioned why government accounts and politicians were so eager to spotlight it. Politicians here received a lot of backlash. I saw a photo of Kemi Badenoch celebrating with members of the British Hindu community. That triggered, another wave of criticism. And I'm not really interested in outrage for the sake of it. At first, I thought it wasn't that serious. People were maybe overreacting, because after all, it is a festival that means a lot to many people, and a simple greeting shouldn't be so controversial. But the more I thought about it, right, the more I realized that in our current climate, it probably actually does matter a bit. I think in recent years, Britain has entered what I would call a crisis of cultural coherence. The traditional anchors of national identity, shared history, common rituals, shaped really by Christianity, then it became more liberal humanism, but these have gradually been replaced by a policy-driven model of multicultural recognition. But this obsession with visibility, this obsession in trying to include everyone, I don't think it's brought people or brings people closer together. It only makes the country feel more divided. There's no shared sense of home anymore. This shift is what many sociologists refer to as state multiculturalism, that deliberate use of public institutions, symbolic gestures, even legislation to promote the visibility of multiple cultures as a sign of progress, of inclusion. The idea is to move away from assimilation and towards mutual validity and recognition, where everyone can feel equally seen and valued. But over time, this approach, I think it's had the opposite effect. Instead of creating that sharedness, that unity, it has produced a patchwork society where groups can really compete for attention and recognition under the banner of diversity. When everything is celebrated with equal weight, nothing feels central. It's not that other cultures shouldn't be acknowledged, but the national story itself, it can't keep being pushed to the side. The more the state tries to be everything to everyone, then the less it stands for anything at all. Part of the problem is that Britain has confused tolerance with appeasement. Tolerance means living peacefully with people who are different, because maybe you are confident in who you are, but appeasement, it means bending over backwards to avoid offense, even when it costs you a sense of who you are. State multiculturalism, it has turned tolerance, once a strength, into an ideology that treats all beliefs and all customs as equally valid. But if everything is equally valid, then there's no foundation, really. There's no center, there's no root. And when I say valid, I'm not talking about morally valid, right? I'm talking about this idea that all subcultures should hold the same weight or importance to the nation as a whole, that all of them should carry the same influence in forming and shaping the national identity and the national character. But that is a problem. The host culture must remain at the center, because that's what provides the framework that gives shape and coherence to the nation. It is the anchor. Every country has a guiding culture, because, what if every community wants their own festivals and holidays recognized? What then? Where is it going to stop? That's why, yes, people should be free, of course, to celebrate in their own homes, maybe organize something within their own community, something small. That's what a tolerant society allows. The culture is becoming so mixed and so diluted that we actually don't know what British culture is anymore. And don't let people on the left or progressives gaslight you. Oh, but what is British culture? There has never been a British culture. British culture doesn't exist. No, there clearly was. Throughout history, it was actually very clear. But the reason why it's not clear now is because it's been attacked, it's been rewritten in the name of progressiveness. When all cultures are actively promoted and endorsed by the state, then the host culture is indirectly reduced to a subculture. And then what happens is that the country stops being a nation in any real sense. That's why the idea of monoculturalism deserves to be reconsidered as a framework for social coherence. Monoculturalism simply recognizes that every stable society needs a dominant cultural narrative that orders public life. Political and cultural institutions began treating and still treat the idea of a dominant culture as a problem to be solved rather than a source for stability. Yet without a unifying culture, this much praised diversity, it quickly turns into competition and fragmentation and then chaos. Monoculturalism, properly understood, is not necessarily about hierarchy or purity. It's about orientation. It says, this is the story we all share, the language we speak to one another, the institutions we uphold and hold accountable, the national holidays we care about or define us. Within this, there is room for other faiths and background, but there can only be one public main culture. Look at somewhere like Japan. Japan is largely homogenous, but culturally open in some ways. Global business, tourism, some Western pop culture, but its state and public institutions remain deeply anchored in Japanese identity. The UAE is highly international, but its laws, public symbols, and holidays remain explicitly Islamic and Arabic. In fact, part of Dubai's global appeal is that it manages diversity within a very clear cultural hierarchy. This is what Britain needs to recover: a renewed confidence in its own cultural core. Instead of protecting what makes this country feel like home, too many in politics and culture try to replace and demonize and erase national identity in the name of diversity and inclusion. Let me know what you think about this. If you've made it this far, please subscribe, like, do support the channel. It really means a lot and it allows me to do so much more. See you soon.